So if I'm just showing up and it's my first day, I will look mostly at a couple of things. So I'll look and see how much money is in the bank. The approach is a lot different. If we're not going to make payroll that's due in 2 weeks, I'm going to focus on different things. And if things are okay and it looks like things are running smoothly, I really draw a lot on my experience actually doing this work. I think that every complicated situation you go into gives you new information and helps you be a little bit better at the next one. So I am fortunate to have a weird level of experience with showing up and having things be kind of on fire. I think I can remember some things that I learned from that particular engagement.
You're listening to the Nonprofit Counsel podcast with host May Harris.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Counsel podcast. My name is May Harris, and today my guest is Hampton Dohrman, who is the founder and CEO of Hampton Nonprofit Management, a local firm in San Diego, who I think you do a lot of things for nonprofits. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Hampton. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here. My firm is called Hampton Nonprofit Management. We do accounting, HR operations, executive interim management. Sometimes I say it's all the boring stuff that goes into making nonprofits work. We've been doing this work on purpose and organized, I think, for 5 years. I've got a team of 10 folks who help me out with this. Most of our clients are in San Diego, but we do have some national clients as well.
Awesome. Well, we first met in a situation where, I reached out to you because I had a client who needed an interim executive director. They were undergoing crisis. They were in not the best spot legally or I think financially, but definitely not operationally. So when you go into organizations like that, where there's chaos or conflict or just general messiness, what are some of the things that you look for from an operational and a financial perspective to get, I guess, kind of right the ship?
Sure. So if I'm just showing up and it's my first day, I will look mostly at a couple of things. So I'll look and see how much money is in the bank. The approach is a lot different. If we're not going to make payroll that's due in 2 weeks, I'm going to focus on different things. And if things are okay and it looks like things are running smoothly, I really draw a lot on my experience actually doing this work. I think that every complicated situation you go into gives you new information and helps you be a little bit better at the next one. So I am fortunate to have a weird level of experience with showing up and having things be kind of on fire. I think I can remember some things that I learned from that particular engagement. One is to look at insurance to see, if I know we're not going to run out of money, then that's going to be, okay. I'll look to see sort of compliance wise, are there things that are putting the agency at risk that are immediate concerns? That was a situation that I didn't used to do insurance in the beginning. And I think we got maybe a month into it before I realized that they had been fighting with their workers' comp firm and stopped paying workers' comp like 6 months earlier. So that was the thing I learned. And now I always kind of kick the tires on insurance when I show up. But I'm a very technical person. I'm a kind of a technocrat when it comes to these types of engagements. So I'm looking at, operations, financials, like, what are the big fires that we're dealing with? And if I've got comfort level that, we're not going to go out of business immediately, then I can shift focus to, how are we going to get out of this? What is our goal? Once we understand what the problem is and understand that there's not a different problem that we're not looking at. I think that's one of the most important things in going into a situation is, the biggest problem you're facing is not always the one that you're aware of. So really making sure that I understand, broadly how things work, where the files are, how much money is in the bank, are we current on our stuff that could put us really at risk? And then from there, it's a little different at every place depending on what the needs are.
Right. So reflecting back to that particular client and engagement, you came in a complete firestorm. So what are some of the things that you mentioned insurance, but what are some of the things that you require or the organization requires you to put kind of in good structure or standing before you can hand it off to whoever is now on the hook as executive director, but who is now fiduciarily responsible? What kind of, pathway or workflow do you work through when you're doing these kinds of engagements?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's getting caught up with the kind of regular operational flow. If we're going from, a mess where there's maybe none of that sort of regularity, getting to the point where we are current with financials, we're current with what we need to pay for bills, we're, everything that needs to be in place from an HR perspective is in place. That particular engagement, I think there were a couple people suing us. And so I think that's why you were involved. So I think that that resolution was kind of unique in that engagement. But I mean, I am one of my favorite parts of the experience is that sort of like planning for transition at the end, where I can spend the time, I know where to find things. I've found secret hidden problems before, so I know how to kind of go through files, go through the financials, go through the systems, get everything kind of current. It's amazing to have a team with me to work on that now. That's something I didn't have when I was doing that engagement, so we can really move a lot faster, and I'm able to manage the workflow with kind of splitting things up, and this person focuses on this person focuses on that. And once we're in a kind of normal operational role, that planning for transition is really satisfying for me. And in this particular engagement was particularly so because we were able to get somebody who is not a traditional candidate for this sort of executive role, but I was able to sort of stick around and do a long tail transition and kind of do some, kind of leadership development, not leadership development, but, skills development on how does insurance work? How does payroll work? There are things that are threshold criteria for what you need to know to run an organization that there's not really a way you learn it unless you've already run an organization. So you get this sort of, potential cycle of the same people running the same thing. So anytime we're able to bring somebody new with a different background and the executive director is still there and the organization is doing great, was particularly satisfying in that one, that, being available to help kind of long transition is one of my favorite parts of doing it.
Right. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think as if I were coming in as an executive director of an organization, I would love to come into an organization that's been cleaned up and streamlined, and you've turned over every rock, and, you've got the skeletons out of the closet and you've addressed them. And then had that nice long kind of handoff of the baton. I think that's incredibly valuable for organizations.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So you're one of our subject matter experts for the Nonprofit Counsel Leadership Accelerator. And we work together, and you're really focusing on educating the next generation of leaders and managers in finance and operations. So it's wonderful to work with you on that. But what are some of the things that you believe that new nonprofit organizations, not the ones necessarily in chaos, but the new nonprofit organizations really need to focus on when they're getting started, the first 1 to 3 years of their operations?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, this is something that draws on my kind of longer term background as someone who has started and run a few nonprofits where I didn't know anything of what I was doing. I think that experience with the really kind of grassroots fringes of what our sector is doing, some of my favorite places to work, because you can meet these incredible people with a ton of passion, a ton of specific knowledge about how to help a specific group of people or a specific mission. And then sometimes not any other sort of awareness of how this is kind of supposed to work. I think understanding where people are coming from is really important. I sometimes say there's like a gradient of correctness in doing things. There's, best case and best practices. My first organizations, I never had a board meeting. My mom was on the board. We didn't have a bank account, these sort of things. And we were still able to do programming that was pretty impactful for what we were working on. So I think in the beginning, just kind of being aware of what the rules are and being aware of what larger organizations are doing with an understanding of that. It's going to take a while to get there. And anything that's kind of an operational improvement or a financial improvement, we have this sort of cyclicality of monthly financials and then annual reports. So there's always an opportunity to do better. I think, a little bit better each time is more of a goal than trying to go from zero to perfect financials right in the beginning. And also, perfect financials are nobody's goal in a nonprofit organization. It's one of the things that helps us run better and more effectively. You could run an effective organization never having financials. So understanding, again, what the sort of capacity and the kind of intellectual curiosity of the folks we're working with is really important. I think understanding what the rules are and what the structures can be is important, and then deciding, not that we decided to tell people to like not do the rules. But, if we don't have, class-based financials right now or aren't able to do that, maybe something we put down the road and we work on, something that's more immediate, helpful to put the mission at forefront. And I think that's one of the things that makes us unique as a firm when we're helping folks is that, we are always working towards the mission, even though we may be working on accounting, we may be working on HR, but every decision we make, me and the whole team, is based on that mission. And if it's going to get us there, that's what we're going to focus on. Sometimes you have to do things like audits and sales tax and, 990s or some rules, but beyond that, it's really, really customizable. And I think really generative too. There's a creative aspect to, building out a system for the first time and really being able to match, the skill sets of the folks who are managing it with the, goals and the structure of where they're trying to go. And then what they need from the kind of day-to-day things.
Right. So I love that. Is focus on your mission first, make it central to anything and everything you do, including your financials and mapping your financials to start. So it's perfect, advice for founders. But let's fast forward a little bit. We've got a more mature organization who is now having to report out on a full 990, so greater than 200,000 in regular annual revenue or gross receipts. So for an executive director of an organization like that, what do you think are the integral kind of parts to understanding financials of a nonprofit and then being able to present those nonprofit financials to their board? And conversely, on the other side, what kind of, expertise or information do boards need in order to adequately interpret those financials?
Oh, sure. So I'll take the first question first. So I think, as someone who's kind of in a not so new organization getting bigger, I think looking at information in time is the most important sort of upgrade that we make with a lot of folks. An annual budget becomes a budget that is not just divided by 12, but that has, seasonality and actual planning in that. I think for someone who's running an organization, the ability to look forward is, I think, much more helpful than looking backwards. By the time something gets to me, in a financial statement or on an audit, it's too late to do anything. If I don't like that number, it's too late. That number is already whatever it is. But if I'm looking forward and I'm doing sort of cash focused, planning, if I'm doing a budget that's out into the future, you start to really get the ability to use financials as a way that aligns with the broader storytelling of the organization, so that that if I'm looking in the future, my priorities that are in my budget are matching the priorities that I've got strategically and from a mission perspective. I think that's where things really, really start to click. And if it's someone who's new to doing this, if they can learn that earlier, I think that is hugely impactful. There's a lot of folks who can, be at organizations and leadership and management for years and years and years and not have these tools. So that kind of awareness of how do I connect the dots? So they're not two separate things, but the spending I have on payroll or the spending that I have on program supplies is going to be related to what my goal is and what I'm working on from a mission perspective. And when you start to align those things, that's when you really can, be able to help get folks on board with, either their funders or new program partners, or if you're talking to the board, I think that ability to, again, connecting everything back with the mission, even if they've got, a dollar sign in front of the numbers, we're still, trying to show things in a way about what we're looking for in the future. I think for boards of directors, it's interesting. We do a lot of this. Boards are a very unique dynamic of importance in organizations. When you're in the kind of beginning of organization, it's very common for them not to be so important. So being able to have a strong board from the beginning, I also think is really impactful, because a founder will take an organization, really far, doing it kind of all themselves, and then realize, oh, there's a way that I can get like a dozen people to like work on this with me for free, if I kind of get them involved at the board level and get them involved in committees and where they can be impactful. I think financial information for the board, again, goes back to like, what do they need to make decisions in their role with the organization? The board is there to look out sort of big picture, big future, fiduciary, making sure that things are going to be okay next year, the year after that, the year after that. So there is a heavy sort of compliance viewpoint to it, but also doesn't need to get in the weeds as much. So board financials are pretty commonly like shorter and don't have all the details. the details are always available, and that's when a committee structure can be really helpful. But I think of board meetings as marketing for a lot of executive directors. You have a goal of what you want your board to be engaged around or to be focused on, or where you need help. Do I need help fundraising? Do I need help with this? We're going into a new neighborhood and need some sort of authenticity to expand programming. I think, and the reason I call it marketing is doing stuff to get a particular action to happen. So all that information, all of that material should be kind of in line with what the executive director needs help with and what do they want the board to focus on.
Right. So, you've really focused on the perspective of the executive director, and I really appreciate that. But conversely, when you're looking at a board, at least in my experience, a nonprofit board, they're volunteers. Like you said, they come from all walks of life, all different experiences, all different expertise when it comes to financial information. And even the ones who might be savvy for business financial statements, they don't necessarily understand how nonprofit financial statements differ. So, fundamental financial literacy for nonprofit boards, I think, is critical. And some of those things, how nonprofit financials differ from for-profit, similarly organized or same level for-profits. What are some of the things that you kind of train nonprofit board members to kind of understand? I'm thinking they've got to understand restricted and non-restricted funds, which you don't see that in a for-profit, for example. Program service revenue, gifts, grants, contributions, how to distinguish, advocacy, you have to track that differently as a 501c3, for example. What are some of the things that you have found useful in training nonprofit boards?
Yeah, I think, one of the kind of big fundamental things that's present in nonprofits that's not always present in for-profits is this kind of allocation environment where, when you get of size and it's that 200,000 threshold to do that kind of full 990, the disclosure requirements, have us put things into an admin column and a fundraising column and a program column. So the ability to understand how, one expense might affect multiple different things, I think is kind of a fundamental learning. And we always focus on, if we're going to have to do a program column, let's kind of use that as information that helps us run the business better. So if we are doing 3 major programs, segmenting the costs out and being able to allocate common costs across really give us the understanding of, did that make any money? Did it lose money? Nonprofits are also unique in the fact that losing money is not a bad thing. Our goal is actually to spend all the money that we get, doing the mission that we're working on. So I always, tell people the important thing is to do it on purpose. So if you're going to lose money, make sure you're doing that on purpose. And that understanding of, my new program that's super important to me and has, great legs in the future may lose money now, but I'm doing that on purpose because I'm going to make money off of my fundraiser. I'm going to make money off of the fee for service program that is making money. But being able to understand how the different parts of the organization work and that interplay between them, I think is really unique to a nonprofit organization. Something for-profits can do obviously on their own, but because of what our disclosure requirements are in 990, we have to do it anyways. And so just taking it to that sort of next step to really get our economics of different programs versus how much it costs to keep the lights on, the trains running and all that, and our cost for fundraising. I think that interplay and that understanding of the economics of the organization are super important to then be able to make, informed decisions of, this is going to lose money, but we're doing that on purpose so that it can grow, or because we have the money from something else, or we have the money from reserves, or we've got money from prior years that rolls over. It's a thing around budget season. We're always kind of re-educating folks around of, if I'm showing a loss for this year, but I have a lot of, restricted funding or cash left over from prior years, it's okay to lose money sometimes. Again, always making sure that you're not doing it by accident and that it's, covered by something or covered by something that happened in the past.
Well, I actually love that. What was your statement? It was you can do it. You can lose money, but it has to be on purpose.
Oh, yeah,
you have
yeah.
to plan it.
Doing everything on purpose. Losing money on purpose.
I love that. Yeah. Well, and because that also gives you the opportunity, you did mention the 990, but you're going to have to report all of these things out. And, there's such a missed opportunity in 990 reporting, in my opinion, and that is really crafting a compelling narrative about why certain things are happening that you can see on the financial statements, you can see on the reporting, funders, grantors, general public, charity regulators can see a story in the numbers. But if you can follow that up with a compelling narrative in program service accomplishments or even in Schedule O, right? That you're already ahead of the game if you've planned it and you already know what the compelling narrative is going to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. We do that very infrequently for organizations, but it's something we're starting to do more. We had a client recently who wanted to update all the audit notes to actually be relative to them and not just the boilerplate that the auditors give you and that you had last year. You just use the same thing over and over and over. I've seen 990s that have the same spelling error for like 5 years in a row because you just use the same information. It's a regulatory and kind of a threshold criteria. Like you have to do it, so. But I think there are opportunities to do just a little bit of nuance and kind of have that kind of broader storytelling of what's happening with the organization.
Absolutely. I am a full proponent of that. The 990 is a storytelling and a marketing and client communication all wrapped into one.
Yeah, totally. And it's publicly available. Audits are publicly available, or not publicly, but you can like request an audit. But 990s are out there for anyone. And, we've had, there's robots, AI scrapers kind of pulling information together from them. And, if it is going to be out there and available for everyone to look at, I think that's one of the really kind of nice philosophical trade-offs of a nonprofit organization is that requirement to be transparent about your financials in exchange for tax exemption, because, nobody really owns anything in a nonprofit. The like community and the people in general own this. And if we are all owners of these organizations, we should be able to see what the financials are. And I think that's, it's a technical requirement that you get really kind of focused on, but, there are opportunities to make it part of the broader marketing. Anything that's out there is part of your whole brand strategy for an organization. So, why not make it relevant?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add for our listeners? We have nonprofit leaders, nonprofit managers, executives, directors who all tune into the podcast. Is there anything that you would like to add for them?
I think that, the benefit of doing the operations piece well is something that's hard to quantify. I think I think one of the things I'm proud about our firm and what we do for consulting work is that we are not, I say we're not describers of problems. We're not identifiers of problems. We're fixers of problems. So taking it all the way through to actually fixing things and putting things in place and setting up the accounts and setting up the systems in a way that can be helpful. Good systems and good automation, I think, is critical to both keeping costs on the admin side down, meaning you can spend more money on programming, and the kind of, what do they call it? The overhead myth with that debate of like, you're spending too much on admin. I always say that, if you're doing it right, you're doing all three all at the same time, because the best programming, the best fundraising, is good programming. Good programs are expensive to run, and the best programs have good management. So I think that, being able to focus on both the details and the big picture at the same time is really important. And it's something that anyone can learn in their sort of path as they're working as a leader. And it's something that I'm always excited to be able to help folks with.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I really do think it's a mindset issue with a lot of nonprofit leaders. And the overhead myth is only just fed into that. Like, oh, well, we can't spend any of our funds on, operations, systems, improvements, efficiencies,
Yeah.
We have to do it all in program. Well, you're doing yourself a disservice and the people you serve, in my opinion, when you overlook that. And I do think that funders are getting a little bit more savvy to that. You can't ask, organizations to operate on a skeleton crew and be really impactful.
Yeah. And I think too that, good financials are part of fundraising also. If you're going to a funder and your thing prints on 2 pages, or the numbers don't add up, or it looks like it's right out of a spreadsheet, and, I think all of it is related and all of it's part of that same mission. And I think that, again, to points we've made earlier, that broad continuity of everything is working towards this mission, is working towards our same story.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Hampton, for being on the podcast. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Counsel podcast. Are you ready to lead with clarity and confidence? Head to nonprofitcounsel.com to find the tools you need to start smart, lead strong, and create lasting impact.